Hello, Vermont Interfaith Action. This is Dwayne Royster, Northeast Regional Director for Faith in Action, and I am so glad to be here with you today. I know that it's COVID, and under normal circumstances, I would be in Vermont with you at this moment in time. But due to COVID-19, we're unable to make the travel, but we're able to come to each other virtually in this moment. And I'm so grateful to be able to do that with you today. I want to thank your executive director, Debbie Ingram, for the invitation to come at the behest of the board to come and share with you today. And I want to let you know that on behalf of Reverend Alvin Herring, the Executive Director of Faith in Action, and all of your sibling organizations across the United States, we're so grateful for the work of Vermont Interfaith Action. And I always remember that it was you all that helped us to begin thinking about the term moral economy and what it means to build a moral economy in our communities and in our country. And I deeply appreciate the leadership that you have given Faith in Action throughout the years, even just the work that you've most recently done around voting and getting out and talk to 5,000 people in the state of Vermont, having those conversations with them, making sure that they participated in democracy so that they could have a say in the collective destiny of our communities. Deeply, deeply, deeply appreciate your leadership. I thought for just a few moments today we could talk together. Some of you were with us some years ago in Baltimore when we were at the Maritime Center, and I presented this notion, this concept of being architects of a new America. And I wonder, in this particular moment that we find ourselves, that we are being invited to become architects of a new America. Um, you know, a lot of religious folk, and I know that there are a lot of Christian folk in the room, and hopefully there are other faith traditions that are in this space. But if I could just come out of my Christian context for a minute, a lot of people over the last few years have talked about this being the apocalypse. This is the end of time, the end of things as we know it, and people are kind of proclaiming doom and gloom and destruction of the world. A great many things, and all depending on where you land, you could actually see that there was a lot of destruction, a lot of chaos that ensued over the last few years of our existence as a country. Not only the country, but the whole world was struggling with similar issues that the United States was struggling with. But one of the things when you really look at the word apocalypse, if you go back and go to the ancient Greek, actually apocalypse actually means revelation. It actually means a revelation. And when I think back over the course of the last few years, I really think that what we've experienced has been deep revelation in this country, pulling away all the political correctness, pulling away all the niceties that we are apt to have with one another. We began to see deeply the division and the pain and the angst that existed in our nation, the ways that that inequality had manifested itself in such a way that some communities saw equality as a demotion if they would allow other communities to have some level of equality and perhaps even equity. We began to see the stark contrast between the haves and the have-nots, and also the rhetoric and the doublespeak. I always think about George Orwell's book 1984 when he talked about the doublespeak that would come in this time frame, where people are being made to believe that there's some folk that are working in their interest, even though in reality they're not working in their interest at all. And so we saw the deepening inequality. We saw the deepening divide in some sense between the have and the have-nots, or those that that wish they had, and so they align themselves with the haves. That were becoming more and more rooted in what we were experiencing and facing in our communities over these last few years. And then, most recently, the struggle to survive, the ability to have resources, economic resources, even as we face COVID-19, as we watched our communities and our cities and our states shut down, as we began to experience the economic decline that would come as a result of that. And we were able to see very clearly the agenda of those that were more concerned about the economy than they were concerned about people, and that the people themselves were nothing more than codified labor. So they were labor but not for the purpose of their humanity, but for the purpose of stimulating the economy so that the 1% or the haves, or however you, the oligarchs, or all those many terms that we could use for people, would be able to have more, whether or not the folk that were actually producing the labor were healthy and strengthened and had the resources to care for themselves and their families. We were watching the deepening divide around race in this country. There was a revelation. It's not that it wasn't there, but I think people for the first time were actually able to see the blatancy of the race issues when we saw the killing of George Floyd, the brutal, the raw, the hatred that existed in that moment when George Floyd was killed. When we continued to hear about what happened to Breonna Taylor, and when we saw what happened to Ahmaud Arbery, we just the stark contrast in the issue of race that has continued to plague us over and over again. This became a reality, not just for those that are communities of color, the Black, Indigenous people of color that are out there, but I think everybody was actually able to see this for themselves and begin to say, this is a problem. And then we saw the debate about the election challenges and democracy, and whether democracy, worked, and whether we could vote by mail. And I know for Vermont, some of these issues are like things that you all have been addressing for decades. But in other parts of the country, the challenge that of legal votes versus illegal votes, and we wound up having one of the most watched elections in human history that we are aware of. And yet, even in the midst of this election, when we finally get down to the candidates that were there, 5 million votes separated them. And one represented perhaps a time, a different place in human history, hearkening back to a good day, and then the other hearkened to this deep nature of race and racism and dog whistles that existed, homogeny, toxic masculinity, you name it. The current president represented all those things, and yet in states where he also won the election, ballot initiatives like winning $15 an hour won, places where we began to see both medical marijuana be approved in ballot measures and in recreational use of marijuana come. And we had to begin to ask ourselves some hard questions like, what is this that in these conservative areas, these progressive policies are passing at the same time? I believe this is an opportune moment for organizations like ours, like Vermont Interfaith Action, like Faith in Action nationally, to begin to ask and have dialogue with the harder questions about getting to the real self interest of folk, whether they are on the right or on the left. Because we're beginning to see that perhaps some of the divide that we have might be more about the personalities that are driving the message than the people that are actually dealing with the issues that are facing in their own lives every day. The fact that folk want a $15 hour minimum wage, the fact that folk want access to resources and medicinal uses of marijuana and other drugs for that matter. The fact that there are people out there that are struggling right now who are asking hard questions about how do we survive in this economy, and because they heard a message that spoke to them, they voted one way, even though the policies that they long for and need are in the other direction. I think this is a space when we as communities of faith can actually begin to help bridge some of these gaps and begin to lay out for people an architect of America that's not divided by red or blue. It's not divided by Republican or Democrat, but we can actually begin to have a conversation about what does it mean to build beloved community where every person is actually able to thrive and live their full best lives. And at the same time, can we begin to have a conversation with these people when we're talking about their self interest and what they need to survive and what they need to be able to make it from one day to the next? Can we also begin to have a conversation with them and say, but folk that don't look like you have those same concerns and desires. They too want to be able to live a full life, a safe life, have health care, have resources, be able to get paid decent money so that they can take care of their families. This is the moment when we will be able to rise up in different ways, not because we're coming at this from an ideological standpoint, but because deeply rooted in our sense of being, in our faith traditions, we are told, at least I can speak from my Christian perspective, and not to no offense to anybody else, but we believe we're all created in the image and likeness of God. And if that is the case, if there is a divine image in every person that I come across, regardless of their race or their gender or gender identity, orientation, if there is they're created in the image of God, then when I see them, I also need to be able to see the gift that they are to the world and the gift that they are to us, and that we are gifts to each other to be able to grow and to thrive and to be able to live our full best lives. Can we, coming from this deep sense of love of creation, love of humanity that God has for each and every one of us, begin the process of reaching out to our siblings and talking with them and working with them and loving on them and helping them to understand that we are all in this thing together. There's one earth that we all have to live on, one planet that we have to be able to figure out how to make sure that it works right. There was one big economy in this country that we have to work together to make sure that everybody has everything that they need, and that those that don't have the opportunity to get access to the resources so that they can grow and thrive and live their full best life. So I want to challenge us in the days ahead that could you be architect of a new Vermont, a Vermont where everybody has a house to live, has the food they need to eat, is able to make the money that they need, they have the health care to help take care of themselves and their family, the children have the best education possible, best education possible. Can you imagine living into a new Vermont, and then help us imagine what it would mean to build and be architects of a new America, an America where all of us are able to live, thrive, and be at peace, where perhaps we begin to put people over profits. We put faith over our fear. And we have an imagination of a new world, a new country, a new state, new communities where everybody is welcome and can expect to be embraced. Can we imagine a country where we care enough about each other that we all put face masks on, use plenty of hand sanitizer, and that we care for each other so that we can get rid of COVID-19? Can we be architects of that new America that says your survival is tied up in my survival and that we need each other to be able to make this world work in a better way? Can we build new alliances and new relationships? Can we talk to folk that maybe we didn't think we should talk to, so we can find a way to build a new America? Vermont Interfaith Action, I hope that you join with us as we try to do this work in this new day, building a new world where all of us are able to live our full best lives. Thank you for inviting me and have me come be with you today. And I look forward to sometime in the very near future, when we get past all this stuff, being able to come and be in your presence. God bless you. Amen.